My name is Lena, and I am 58 years old. Right now, I am sitting on the terrace of my house in Valencia, Spain, watching the Mediterranean sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The gentle breeze carries the scent of jasmine from my garden, and for the first time in 3 years, I feel truly at peace. But this tranquility came at a price that nearly cost me my relationship with my only son. You see, when my husband David passed away suddenly, I made a decision that would change everything. I chose to keep our second home here in Spain a secret from Marcus, my son. Before I share this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, this decision saved my entire future. 3 years ago, my world collapsed in an instant. David, my husband of 32 years, suffered a massive heart attack while working in his home office. He was only 60 years old, still full of dreams and plans for our future. We had built what I thought was a perfect life together in Portland, Oregon. David was a successful civil engineer who had worked on some of the city's most important infrastructure projects. I spent my career as an elementary school teacher shaping young minds and finding joy in their bright faces every day. Our son Marcus had always been the center of our universe. At 30 years old, he worked for a major tech company in Seattle, earning more money than David and I ever dreamed of when we were his age. He lived in a sleek downtown apartment with his girlfriend Jessica, a 28-year-old marketing executive who seemed to measure everything by its monetary value. What Marcus did not know, and what only David and I shared, was that in 2018, David had made what he called the investment of our lifetime. While researching retirement destinations, he had fallen in love with a property listing for a villa in Valencia, Spain. The 3-bedroom house sat on a hillside overlooking the Mediterranean, complete with a charming garden filled with olive trees and lavender. The price was reasonable by American standards, about 400,000 euros, and David saw it as both a smart investment and our future retirement haven. We had visited Valencia twice before purchasing the house, falling more deeply in love with the culture, the food, and the warmth of the Spanish people with each trip. David dreamed of converting part of the villa into a small bed and breakfast, welcoming travelers while living comfortably off the rental income. We spent hours planning which rooms we would renovate first, how we would design the garden, and what local attractions we would recommend to our future guests. The purchase was handled entirely through David's business accounts to take advantage of certain tax benefits, and we never mentioned it to Marcus because we wanted to surprise him with our retirement plans when the time was right. David always said he wanted to see the look on Marcus's face when we told him we were becoming international property owners and small business entrepreneurs in our golden years. But David never got the chance to see that look. On a rainy Tuesday morning in October, while I was teaching my 3rd grade class about fractions, my world shattered. The principal knocked on my classroom door with tears in her eyes, and I knew immediately that something terrible had happened. David had been found at his desk by his assistant when he failed to show up for an important meeting. The weeks following David's funeral passed in a blur of paperwork, condolence visits, and sleepless nights. I was drowning in legal documents, insurance claims, and the overwhelming task of settling his estate. Between the grief and the bureaucracy, I simply could not bring myself to deal with the complexities of the Spanish property. The house felt like a secret David and I shared, too precious and too painful to expose to the harsh realities of estate planning and family discussions. Marcus flew in from Seattle the day after the funeral and immediately began what he called helping Mom get organized. At first, I was grateful for his attention and support. I assumed his frequent questions about bank accounts and insurance policies were normal expressions of concern for my well-being. But as the days turned into weeks, Marcus's behavior began to feel less like support and more like surveillance. He would arrive at my house each morning with coffee and pastries, then spend hours at David's desk, going through files and making phone calls. When I asked what he was doing, he would pat my shoulder and say he was just making sure everything was in order for my financial security. I discovered that Marcus had contacted our bank, our insurance agent, and even David's attorney without asking my permission. When I confronted him about these calls, he explained that he was gathering information to help me make informed decisions about my future. He spoke to me in the same tone I once used with my 3rd grade students when explaining difficult concepts, and it made my skin crawl. The situation escalated when Marcus presented me with what he called a practical solution to Mom's new circumstances. He had researched retirement communities in Seattle and found what he described as a perfect place for me to live. The facility was only 20 minutes from his apartment, featured on-site medical care, and would allow me to enjoy my golden years without the stress of maintaining a big house. When I told him I had no intention of leaving Portland or selling the house David and I had shared for 15 years, Marcus's demeanor shifted noticeably. He began speaking about my emotional decision-making and suggested that grief was clouding my judgment. He even arranged for me to meet with a financial advisor named Robert Chen, a smooth-talking man in an expensive suit who began every sentence with, "at your age," or "for someone in your situation." During our meeting, Robert Chen presented charts and graphs showing how much money I would save by downsizing my life. He recommended selling the house, investing the proceeds in conservative bonds, and moving to a more manageable living situation. When I asked pointed questions about his recommendations, both he and Marcus exchanged looks that made me feel like a child being humored by adults. The breaking point came when my dear friend Patricia stopped by for our usual Wednesday afternoon tea. Patricia, a 65-year-old widow who had lost her husband 2 years earlier, took one look at the papers scattered across my dining room table and immediately understood what was happening. After Marcus left that evening, Patricia sat me down for one of the most important conversations of my life. "Lena," she said, stirring honey into her tea with deliberate slowness, "I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear. My daughter tried the exact same thing when George died. All this concern about your finances, all this talk about making things easier for you, it is not really about your well-being." Patricia went on to explain how her own daughter had pressured her to sell her house and move into a senior living facility, all while positioning herself as the helpful child looking out for mom's best interests. It was only when Patricia consulted with an independent attorney that she learned her daughter was hoping to inherit the house proceeds immediately, rather than waiting for her mother's natural death. "The thing that saved me," Patricia continued, "was having assets my daughter did not know about. George and I had purchased a small cabin in the mountains years before he died, and I never mentioned it during all the estate discussions. That cabin became my escape plan, my proof to myself that I still had independent choices to make." As Patricia spoke, I felt a chill run down my spine. I thought about the villa in Valencia sitting empty on its hillside overlooking the Mediterranean. I thought about David's dreams of running a bed and breakfast, of learning Spanish, of growing old together in a place where the sun shone 300 days a year. Most importantly, I thought about the fact that Marcus had no idea this house existed. That night, I made my first truly independent decision as a widow. I would not tell Marcus about the Spanish property until I was absolutely certain of his motives. If he truly cared about my happiness and security, the existence of additional assets should not change his behavior toward me. But if his concern was really about controlling and accessing my inheritance, the secret house would become my insurance policy. My instincts about Marcus proved correct faster than I had hoped. Within a week of my conversation with Patricia, his behavior became increasingly aggressive and controlling. He began showing up at my house unannounced, often with Jessica in tow, and the two of them would spend hours discussing my situation as if I were not in the room. Jessica, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer handbags, had opinions about everything from my grocery shopping habits to my choice of television programs. She would walk through my house touching David's belongings and making comments about how difficult it must be to live surrounded by so many memories. When she thought I was not listening, I heard her tell Marcus that I was clearly struggling to accept reality and might need professional intervention to help me make appropriate choices. The situation reached a boiling point during Thanksgiving dinner. I had invited Marcus and Jessica to my house, hoping that a family meal might restore some normalcy to our relationship. Instead, the evening turned into an ambush that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about my son. Marcus arrived with a briefcase full of documents and a plan he had obviously been developing for weeks. Over my carefully prepared turkey dinner, he presented me with papers that would give him power of attorney over my financial affairs. He explained that this was a standard precaution that would protect me from making emotional decisions while I was still grieving. "Mom," he said, cutting his turkey with surgical precision, "I love you too much to watch you make mistakes that could jeopardize your security. Dad would want me to take care of you, and that means taking care of your finances too." Jessica nodded enthusiastically, adding that older people often struggle with complex financial decisions, and that Marcus was just being responsible by ensuring my assets were properly managed. She had clearly rehearsed these talking points, and her patronizing tone made my hands shake with anger. When I refused to sign the papers, Marcus's mask finally slipped completely. He accused me of being stubborn and unreasonable, and demanded to know why I was hiding something if I had nothing to be ashamed of. He had clearly been monitoring my bank accounts more closely than I realized, because he began asking specific questions about certain transactions and transfers that I could not immediately explain. The most chilling moment came when Marcus leaned across the table, his eyes cold and calculating, and said, "Mom, if you cannot make rational decisions about your own welfare, Jessica and I will have to explore other options for ensuring your care. There are legal ways to protect people from themselves." The threat was clear, and it left me feeling more alone than I had felt even in the darkest days after David's death. My own son was threatening to have me declared mentally incompetent if I did not surrender control of my finances to him. As I watched him and Jessica exchange satisfied glances, I realized that David's death had not just made me a widow. It had made me a target. That night, after Marcus and Jessica left my house in a cloud of barely contained frustration, I sat in David's chair and made a decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. I was going to Valencia, and I was going to do it without telling Marcus where I was really going. 2 weeks later, I told Marcus that Patricia and I had decided to take a healing trip to Europe. I explained that we wanted to visit several countries where we had never been to experience new cultures and create positive memories that were not tied to our grief. Marcus seemed relieved that I was finally taking steps to move forward, and he even offered to help me book flights and accommodations. What Marcus did not know was that Patricia and I had rehearsed this conversation carefully. She was indeed planning a trip to Europe, but she was going to visit her sister in Ireland while I flew alone to Valencia. We had coordinated our departure dates and even taken photos together at the airport to support our cover story. The flight from Portland to Valencia required 2 connections, giving me plenty of time to think about what I was doing and whether I was making a terrible mistake. But as the plane descended toward the Spanish coast and I caught my first glimpse of the Mediterranean sparkling in the afternoon sun, I felt something I had not experienced in months. I felt hope. The villa was even more beautiful than I remembered. Nestled into a hillside about 20 minutes outside Valencia's city center, the house commanded a spectacular view of both the sea and the surrounding countryside. The white stucco walls glowed in the Spanish sunshine, and the red tile roof seemed to warm the entire landscape. David had been right about this place. It was magical. Jose Martinez, the property manager David had hired to maintain the house, greeted me at the front door with a warmth that immediately put me at ease. A gentle man in his mid-60s with weathered hands and kind eyes, Jose had been caring for the property since our purchase, and had obviously taken pride in keeping everything exactly as David would have wanted. "Señora Lena," he said in careful English, "I am so sorry for the loss of Señor David. He was a good man with big dreams for this place. Come, let me show you what we have maintained for you." As Jose led me through the house, pointing out improvements he had made and problems he had solved, I began to understand the full scope of David's vision. The main floor featured a spacious living area with traditional Spanish tiles, a modern kitchen with views of the garden, and a master bedroom that opened directly onto a private terrace. Upstairs, 2 additional bedrooms had been designed with guests in mind, each with its own bathroom and unique views of either the sea or the mountains. But it was the garden that truly took my breath away. Jose had lovingly maintained the olive trees and lavender bushes, and he had added flowering vines that now covered much of the courtyard walls. A small fountain bubbled in the center of the space, and comfortable seating areas had been arranged to take advantage of both morning sun and afternoon shade. "Señor David, he wanted to make this a place where people come to find peace," Jose explained, as we sat in the garden sharing coffee and pastries his wife had prepared. He talked about guests from America who would stay here and learn to love Spain the way he did. He said this would be a bridge between 2 worlds. That evening, I walked down the hillside to the small village below the house, following a path that Jose said led to the best restaurants and shops in the area. The village of Calera was everything David had described in his emails and phone calls. Narrow streets wound between ancient stone buildings and small plazas offered gathering places where locals socialized over wine and tapas. I found myself drawn to a small cafe called Maria's Place, where the owner, a woman about my age with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes, immediately made me feel welcome. When I explained in my limited Spanish that I was David's widow, Maria's face lit up with recognition and sympathy. "Ah, David. He was here many times, always talking about bringing his wife to see our beautiful Valencia. I am Maria Santos, and you must be the teacher he loved so much. He told me you work with children, that you have a kind heart." Over the next hour, Maria and I talked about loss, about starting over, and about the courage it takes to build a new life after everything familiar has been taken away. She told me about her own husband's death 5 years earlier, and how she had turned her small cafe into a gathering place for other women who were learning to navigate the world alone. "The most important thing," Maria said as she walked me back to the path leading home, "is to trust your own instincts about people. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when someone tries to make you feel small or helpless, that tells you everything you need to know about their true motives." As I climbed back up the hillside under a canopy of Spanish stars, I felt something shifting inside me. For the first time since David's death, I was not thinking about what I had lost. Instead, I was thinking about what I might be able to build in this beautiful place that my husband had chosen for our future. My peaceful week in Valencia came to an abrupt end when Marcus appeared at my front door on a Thursday morning, his face flushed with anger and his usual composure completely shattered. I was in the garden, deadheading roses and enjoying the morning sunshine, when I heard the sound of a car in the driveway and turned to see my son storming across the courtyard with murder in his eyes. "So this is where you have been hiding," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "Not touring Europe with Patricia. Not healing from grief. You have been living it up in your secret Spanish mansion while lying to your family about where you were." I stood slowly setting down my gardening shears and trying to process how Marcus had found me. The answer became clear when he pulled out his phone and showed me photographs that had obviously been taken by a private investigator. Pictures of me at the Valencia airport, images of me shopping in the village market, even shots of me having coffee with Maria at her cafe. "Did you really think I would not figure this out?" Marcus continued pacing back and forth across the terrace like a caged animal. "Did you think I was stupid enough to believe your little charade with Patricia I hired professional's mom? Real investigators who do not fall for amateur hour deception." The betrayal I felt in that moment was deeper than anything I had experienced even in the darkest days after David's death. My own son had hired strangers to follow me, to photograph me, to investigate my private activities as if I were a criminal. The violation was so complete that I could barely speak. "How dare you?" I finally managed my voice barely above a whisper. "How dare you have me followed like some kind of suspect in a crime?" Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that bore no resemblance to the joyful child I remembered raising. "Crime, Mom, you are sitting on assets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that you deliberately hid from your family. In some places, that would be considered fraud." As if summoned by his anger, Jessica appeared in the doorway, her designer luggage suggesting they had planned an extended stay. She surveyed the house with calculating eyes, obviously mentally pricing every detail from the hand-painted tiles to the custom ironwork on the windows. "This is quite a setup you have here, Lena," Jessica said with fake sweetness. "Marcus told me you had been hiding assets, but I had no idea the scale was this impressive. No wonder you did not want to move to that retirement community. Why live in a small apartment when you could be living like a queen in Spain?" Over the next several hours, Marcus and Jessica tag-teamed me with accusations, demands, and threats that left me feeling like I was being interrogated by enemy agents rather than having a conversation with family. Marcus had obviously done extensive research on the property because he knew details about the purchase price, the ongoing maintenance costs, and even the potential rental income the house could generate. "Here is what is going to happen," Marcus announced as the sun was setting over the Mediterranean. "You are going to transfer ownership of this property to me, and we are going to convert it into a proper rental investment. The income will go into a managed account that Jessica and I will oversee for your benefit." When I asked what would happen if I refused, Marcus smiled the cold smile of someone who holds all the cards. Then Jessica and I will return to the United States and begin the process of having you declared mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs. We have documentation of your deceptive behavior evidence that you are making irrational financial decisions and testimony from professionals who have observed your inability to cope with complex situations. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud poisoning everything that had felt peaceful and hopeful about my time in Valencia. As I looked at my son and his girlfriend, I realized that they were not here out of love or concern for my well-being. They were here to claim what they considered their rightful inheritance, and they were willing to destroy my reputation and my independence to get it. That night, as Marcus and Jessica made themselves comfortable in my guest bedrooms, as if they owned the place, I sat in the garden and made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I was not going to surrender to their bullying, and I was not going to allow them to steal the future that David and I had planned together. The next morning, while Marcus and Jessica were still sleeping off their jet lag, I quietly left the house and drove to Valencia's city center. I had an appointment with Carmen Rodriguez, an international attorney who specialized in cross-border property law and estate planning. Carmen had been recommended by Maria, who had used her services to protect her own assets when her stepchildren tried to claim her cafe after her husband's death. Carmen's office was located in a beautifully restored building near Valencia's famous Central Market, and her calm professionalism immediately put me at ease. As I explained my situation, she took careful notes and asked probing questions that helped me understand the legal realities of my position. "Señora Lena," Carmen said, after reviewing the documents I had brought, "you should know that you are in a much stronger position than your son realizes. This property was purchased entirely with funds from your husband's business accounts, but the deed shows that ownership was transferred to you personally before his death. Under Spanish law, this makes the house your separate property, not part of any American inheritance." She went on to explain that David had been remarkably clever in structuring the purchase to minimize both Spanish and American tax obligations. By transferring ownership to me while he was still alive, he had effectively removed the property from his estate, meaning Marcus had no legal claim to it regardless of what American inheritance laws might say. Furthermore, Carmen continued, the attempts at intimidation you have described could constitute harassment under both Spanish and American law. If your son continues to threaten legal action based on false premises, we can pursue protective measures. Armed with this legal knowledge and a growing sense of my own power, I returned to the house to find Marcus and Jessica sitting at my kitchen table with papers spread out between them. They had obviously been conducting their own research, and Marcus looked up with a satisfied expression when I walked through the door. "I am glad you are back, Mom, because Jessica and I have been working out the details of our arrangement. We have found a property management company that can handle the rental conversion, and we have calculated that this place should generate at least 3,000 euros per month in income." I set my purse down carefully and took a seat across from them, drawing strength from Carmen's words and from the knowledge that I finally understood my legal position. "Marcus," I said in the calmest voice I could manage, "I have some information that might interest you." Over the next 20 minutes, I explained exactly what Carmen had told me about the property ownership, the inheritance laws, and the legal implications of his threats. As I spoke, I watched the color drain from Marcus's face and Jessica's confident expression transform into something approaching panic. "That is impossible," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dad would never have deliberately excluded me from an asset this valuable. There must be some mistake in the paperwork." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photographs I had taken of the original purchase documents, the ownership transfer papers, and David's handwritten notes about his plans for our retirement. Everything was there, in black and white, including David's explicit statement that he wanted the Spanish property to remain Lena's security and independence. "Your father loved you, Marcus," I said, feeling my own strength growing with every word. "But he also understood that real love means wanting someone to be self-sufficient and confident, not dependent and controlled. This house represents the future he wanted me to have, and I'm going to honor that gift by living the life he and I planned together." Jessica, who had been frantically typing on her phone, looked up with tears in her eyes. "But what about us? What about our future? We have been counting on this inheritance to help us buy a house and start our family. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely sorry for both of them. Not because their inheritance plans had been disrupted, but because they had chosen greed and manipulation over love and family relationships. Jessica, I said gently, if you want to buy a house and start a family, I suggest you do what every other young couple does. Work hard, save your money, and build your own success. Marcus stood up so abruptly that his chair fell over backward. This is not over, Mom. I will not let you throw away everything Dad worked for on some ridiculous fantasy about living in a foreign country. But his words no longer carried the power to frighten me. Marcus, I replied, your father did not work his entire life to leave you an inheritance. He worked to build a life worth living, and now it is time for you to do the same. That afternoon, I drove Marcus and Jessica to the Valencia airport and watched them board a plane back to Seattle. As their flight disappeared into the cloudy sky, I felt something I had not experienced since the day David died. I felt free. 2 years have passed since that confrontation in Valencia, and I can honestly say that choosing to defend my independence was the best decision I have made since David's death. The house that was once our secret retirement dream has become the foundation of a new life that exceeds even our most optimistic expectations. Casa David. As I named the bed and breakfast officially opened 6 months after Marcus and Jessica returned to Seattle. With Jose's help and Maria's guidance, I converted the upstairs bedrooms into comfortable guest accommodations while keeping the main floor as my private living space. The business has been more successful than I ever imagined, with bookings from travelers who want to experience the real Spain while enjoying the comfort and personal attention that only a small family-run establishment can provide. My days are filled with the kind of purposeful activity that I thought I would never experience again. I start each morning with coffee on the terrace, reviewing the day's arrivals and departures while watching the sun rise over the Mediterranean. My guests come from all over the world, and each one brings stories and perspectives that have enriched my understanding of life beyond the boundaries of Portland, Oregon. Learning Spanish has become one of my greatest joys. While my grammar is still imperfect and my accent definitely reveals my American origins, I can now have deep conversations with Maria Jose and my other Spanish friends about everything from local politics to family relationships. The language barrier that once seemed insurmountable has become a bridge to cultural understanding that has made me feel more connected to the world than ever before. The financial independence that Casa David provides has been equally transformative. Between the rental income and the modest profits from the bed and breakfast, I am not only supporting myself comfortably, but actually building savings for the first time since David's death. The irony is not lost on me that the property Marcus wanted to control for my financial security has given me more genuine security than I ever had as a traditionally married American woman. But the most profound change has been in my relationship with myself. The woman who was once afraid to make major decisions without consulting her husband or asking her son's permission has become someone who navigates international business relationships, manages employees, and solves complex problems on a daily basis. I have learned that independence is not just about having your own money or making your own choices. It is about trusting your own judgment and refusing to let other people's fears or greed diminish your possibilities. Marcus and I have slowly rebuilt our relationship, though it looks very different from what either of us expected. Last month, he called to tell me that his marriage to Jessica had ended after she realized that his inheritance prospects were not as promising as she had hoped. He was calling, he said, to apologize for the way he had treated me and to ask if there was any chance we could start over. Our conversation lasted nearly 3 hours, and for the first time since David's death, I heard genuine remorse in Marcus's voice. He admitted that grief and financial anxiety had driven him to behaviors he was now ashamed of, and he acknowledged that his attempts to control my life had been motivated more by his own insecurities than by genuine concern for my well-being. "Mom," he said toward the end of our call, "I realize now that I was so afraid of losing everything Dad left us that I almost lost the most important thing he actually gave me. He gave me a mother who is strong enough to take care of herself and generous enough to forgive her son's mistakes." I told Marcus that forgiveness was always possible, but that our future relationship would need to be built on mutual respect rather than financial expectations. He would always be my son, and I would always love him, but he would need to earn back my trust through his actions rather than his words. We have taken small steps toward rebuilding our connection. Marcus visited Valencia last month, staying at a hotel in the city center, rather than assuming he was welcome in my home. We spent several days together touring the local sites and talking about our lives in ways that felt honest and open for the first time in years. He met Jose, and Maria admired the business I had built and even helped me plant new lavender in the garden. Most importantly, Marcus seemed to understand that I am no longer the dependent widow who needed his protection and guidance. I am a businesswoman, a Spanish resident, and a person who has created meaning and purpose from circumstances that could have destroyed my spirit. When he left Valencia to return to Seattle, I sensed that he was genuinely proud of what I had accomplished, rather than resentful about what he had lost. As I sit here this evening watching the sunset over the Mediterranean for the 1,000th time since I first arrived in Valencia, I am struck by how much my understanding of love and family has evolved. Real love, I have learned, is not about holding on tightly or controlling outcomes. It is about supporting each other's growth, respecting each other's choices, and trusting that strong relationships can survive honest disagreements and difficult conversations. David would be amazed to see what has grown from the seeds he planted with that first property purchase in 2018. But I think he would also be proud to know that his careful planning gave me not just financial security, but the confidence to build a completely new version of myself. The woman writing this story is not the same person who boarded that plane to Valencia 2 years ago, frightened and uncertain about her ability to navigate the world alone. Sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing the people you love. But real love never demands you sacrifice your dignity or independence. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is to refuse to enable their worst impulses, even when that refusal causes temporary pain or anger. Trust is not about blood relations. It is about respect, and respect is something you earn, not inherit. Tonight, as I prepare to welcome new guests tomorrow and plan next month's garden improvements, I am grateful for every difficult decision that led me to this moment. The secret house in Spain that I thought might cost me my son's love actually taught both of us what love really means. And that lesson, more than any inheritance, is the most valuable gift David could have left for our family. What would you do if someone you trusted tried to control your independence? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more real-life experiences about finding strength in unexpected places. And do not forget to share this video with anyone who might need a reminder that it is never too late to start over and build the life you truly deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always have the courage to trust your own instincts when it matters most.